Hello, 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 everyone. Happy Friday. And welcome. I always feel like I have plenty of time to get myself ready for this stream. And then at the very last minute, I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to get everything. Luckily I prep what I'm going to talk about way before because, it takes a while to kind of get everything squared away. Plus, this particular paper was behind a paywall, and I had to figure out if there was a non-paywalled version somewhere. My hair is also doing weird things today. And so it took me a minute to look at everything. But hello, everyone. Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Plant Consciousness Commentary. It's me, Tiria Gardenia, your nature-inspired mentor and certified life coach. But for this particular case, it's more of the world ambassador for plant advocacy that you've come here to see. So if you're new around here, I am a certified life coach, and I work very closely with the kin home, so the plant kin home, to help you kind of realize who you want to be. But one day I will have a cute little snazzy intro. I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet at all. I'm not there in even organizing everything else that I want to organize correctly. I have so many little pieces of paper right now all over the place with my notes of the things that I want to do, but definitely an intro to this commentary is on my list. Okay. I'm trying to get this piece to stay in place, but it keeps just falling back. And I'm not going to touch it because then the whole thing is going to fall apart and I'm going to be weird. Anyways, so, but that's what it is. So last week's episode, I don't even think I completely finished editing the description of it. It was such a strange week. I had students here. As you know, I live in Damanhur, one of the largest spiritual communities in the world, and I am a teacher of what is our initiatic path, so our esoteric school called the School of Medit Action. And I am a teacher for two different groups there, and one half of one group came for a retreat. We have the second half of that group is coming at the end of the month. And it was amazing, 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 amazing. We had an amazing time. It was so much fun to have my students from around the world here all together. We had from the UK, Croatia, Slovenia, the United States, all together for 5 days. But it's very hectic because being an esoteric and magic community, there are just so many little details to take care of. In the middle of that, I was still teaching and seeing clients. And luckily I have a wonderful co-instructor who, it was just great. I have no complaints other than the fact that I was exhausted by the very end of it. And it's right in the middle of the time that the weather is changing here. So it was like hot, cold. And but other than that, it was great. It just meant that my commentary was a little bit cut off because of that. And also it was a weird paper. So I still owe you a full explanation of my feelings. Okay, that's it. I'm redoing this hair. Of my feelings around that paper because there's still things I'm processing it. It didn't go, not from the perspective of how I did, but like the paper itself wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. And they didn't make the arguments that I was expecting them to make. So it was just odd. Anyways, but that's okay. And that's what we have the Naturally Conscious community for, because this is the place where we have our follow-up discussion. So the Naturally Conscious community is your premier ecosystem for all kinds of plant-inspired nourishment. Really understanding how all of this work with the plant world kind of changes who we are. How does it affect us? How is it that we could be influenced, or how do we work really closely with the plant world to create the kind of world that we want to live in? And really right now, given everything that's happening, we definitely need some change. So I am Cuban American. I'm originally from Florida. So I come out of this like week of retreat, which was beautiful. Actually, I am going to tell you about this because hopefully you will enjoy it as much as I did. So I'm, again, like a native Floridian originally, Cuban American, grew up in Miami, I'm very proud of my home state in so many ways, although I do get embarrassed on some things, especially on a political landscape. But we're not going to go there today because that's not the point. We want to say how proud I am of my home state for their preparation for Hurricane Milton. And I spent all of the week. We also have initiates, so people who are part of the initiatic school here at Damanhur who live in the area. And so I spent all of this week really kind of just checking in with them, following what was happening. But also, we as an initiatic and a magical and esoteric community have a lot of technology, spiritual, subtle, whatever words you want to use. I'd love to hear actually what words you do want to use on that. Anyway, we have a lot of different kinds of technology that we use to help kind of move synchronicity and help kind of move events on a synchronic flow, a flow that really is about helping humanity evolve. And so given these massive storms, and Milton, everything that we saw with Milton, of course, here we activated everything that we possibly could to kind of move this weather system into its most synchronic form, which, look, that doesn't always mean avoiding people, or it doesn't always mean causing no harm, because sometimes from a synchronicity perspective, the keeping everything that is in balance, everything that is the not just our own planetary system, but the whole cosmic system in balance is a tricky game. And so the best that we can do here is work with these systems to understand how could they be elements for evolutive change and activate that kind of synchronicity. So we had people who were connected to the wind, who were trying to communicate with the storm and move the storm into a flow that would create the least amount of damage, but the most amount of, I don't want to say good, because, losing your house is never good, but there are things that we could do. And so we did our best here, plus also the preparations that went in, like all the evacuations, everybody preparing. I mean, I really see the response for these types of systems to be such an indication of where we are as humanity. And so even in our dark times, there are some things that just bring us together, that help us better understand our own humanity and who we are, and what, our vulnerabilities as well as our strengths. And I really do think that Florida shined in this period. I would say that most of what I saw and most of what I encountered contacting people, my own family luckily is in the South, so we weren't very much affected by this particular storm, but also most of my team is also in the greater Florida area. So there was just a lot of connection for me with what was going on with Milton. And I spent a lot of time in this Milton system all week long. So coming out of my retreat and then into Milton, it's been intense. But that being said, it also led to some really great reflections, some really good understandings, just a lot of movement overall. And maybe that's exactly what was needed. Maybe synchronically, I'm not saying that, again, destruction, never good, not something that I'm trying to say at all, but I have to look at it with a greater, the greater mission involved, and try to understand what can we learn from this? Where do we go from here? And things like that. Sorry, my tea is very full and it's still very hot. So it's going. So today, so that's where my head has been all week. So with that being said, let's get cracking on this whole, what's the paper we're going to look at today? Now, today's paper, like I said, took me a while to really find to see if it was available outside, not behind a paywall. There are a lot of papers that I want to research that are behind paywalls, some of which I actually can get access to. I can pay for them, or I can get access to them through some of the different ways. Some of them I can't. This one happens to be that it was in a place where I could actually get access to and that I had access to. So I'm very excited. That being said, in searching for the paper, I found an article written by the paper's author. Now, this is a 2022 paper. So we're in 2022. We're actually kind of barreling through 2022. I need to go through I have two different locations where I have my list of papers, but we're into 2022. So it's a relatively new paper. And this paper actually has a stellar cast. Like the amount of people that worked on this that are, just some of the names that we hear, and also some of the names that we haven't heard yet, but that are big names. So you have people like Gustavo Maya Souza, who we talked about just recently, that I got to the pleasure of meeting when I went to Plant Facts a few weeks ago. And we did his paper. And then afterward, we also have Monica Galliano, who we have both read her book, Thus Spoke the Plant, as part of the Plant Wisdom Book Club, as well as we've read several papers. And the paper last week was a paper with Monica Galliano. It was Monica Galliano and Christy Onzik. So we've read her. And then Michael Martyr, who gets cited in all of these papers and who we've also read various papers on. So this is a stellar cast. There's also other people, André Parise, and other names that I'm going to read in a second. So André Jeremia Parise, who is the lead researcher on this paper, it's called Do Plants Pay Attention, also wrote an article about this paper recently. So we're going to do two things. So actually, let me pull the paper up so this is what the version that I have, because it looks like what I have is one of the like preprint type of papers. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this paper, and then yeah, there we go. That's the scene that I want. So we're going to look at, before going deep into the paper itself, we're going to read the article, because sometimes articles are written in a way that are easier. Then we'll start going into the paper, and it might turn out that many of the things that we're looking for are like what we want to go into in the paper is actually in the article. So we'll just do both, and that way we cover all of our bases. And but I just wanted you to see that I actually do have the paper here, and that we do have the paper to reference, but we're going to go into the article first, because I think articles, they just are easier, to be honest. Like they're just easier to read. So let me pull up. It's going to take me a second. By the way, if you enjoy what you're seeing, please like and share and follow, like subscribe to my YouTube, all that kind of good stuff, because that's the algorithm gods. That's what they need. That's what they need in order to show this to more people. Share it on your own YouTube, like anything you could do to really kind of give it a little bit of a boost. Okay. So this paper was released in 2022, and this article was released in January of 2023. So very close to the actual paper itself. And like I said, I wanted to read this because oftentimes articles, this is written by the same lead author. This is on his website itself, which I haven't figured out where. Hold on. I actually haven't figured out where he's from, but I didn't look at it. Where's the original paper? Hold on. So he's Brazilian, from the Laboratory of Plant Cognition and Electrophysiology at the Department of Botany of Institute of Biology, from the Federal University of Pelotas in Pelotas, Brazil, which I'm assuming then he studies under Souza, Gustavo Souza, because that's his laboratory. So very nice, pretty interesting to kind of get that. But let's jump into the paper itself. Hold on a second. I am slow going, man. I am slow going. It's Friday. And so I get excited about doing this, and at the same time, I'm exhausted. It's kind of like a double-edged sword of sorts, but that's what happens. That is, this is a brand new view that I am figuring out with this. Every time every week that I use this, I start to learn new things about how the best way to set everything up. And so your feedback is always welcome. Hold on a second. I just realized that. Oh, great. I, excuse me, set myself up in a way that I can't. Let me take this banner off. I just realized that I had the banner still going. There's somebody that I watch that has a banner, a super cool, like a little banner that comes on the bottom. And it's, it's a banner that sort of says, her name, her Instagram, all those types of things, which I don't actually have. I mean, I guess I have this one. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. It's something like this, but she uses it as a bottom banner. And it's really nice, except for she never takes it off. And it drives me crazy after a while. I have to admit that I'm like, okay, I just want the screen because I want to see, because she always has papers and stuff like that she's going through. And I'm like, I really just want to see this. I want to see what you're working on. So let me set everything up Perfect. Great, great, great. Okay. So this is all about plants pay attention. Now, I want to read for you. I just realized that I set this up wrong. Let me explain something to you that I don't know if he goes into because I haven't, you know me, I don't read these things beforehand. I want to read these to you. Now, attention seems like something stupid. No, not stupid. Banal. Attention seems like something that, of course, plants pay attention. But remember that we're talking about this right now from a scientific perspective. Remember, everything that we're reading in all of these papers are all papers that are about the scientific literature, which means words have a different value than they do in the regular conversation that we have. Now, do plants pay attention? Of course, plants pay attention in the sense that plants take in that plants take in stimulus or stimuli and then they process them. The difference is that attention is selective. And this is the reason why this is important. When Souza did his presentations at, actually, hold on, sorry. This whole view thing. Okay, let me do it where I'm still a little bit bigger because, I'm talking here. So let me be specific as to why this is important. When Souza was doing his presentation at Plant Facts, the conference that I went to in Padova in Italy, he explained more clearly to me, especially a little bit of a lay person in some aspects, why this conversation around attention is so important. Because attention in a scientific perspective is almost always selective attention. Selective attention means I focus my attention on something. So this isn't about plants taking in stimuli and dealing with it, which is what we would think about in a reference to attention from the perspective of, think about it as a kid in school, right? Little kids sitting in school in the classroom, teachers talking, and teacher says, "Are you paying attention to me?" That doesn't mean the person wasn't hearing anything. Of course, the child was hearing, could hear that the teacher was talking, could also hear probably some classmates talking, was also probably doodling or doing something differently. All of these things are happening simultaneously. But where that child puts their attention is a factor of the ability, the cognitive ability that child has to focus into something and selectively not focus on something else. Do you see why this is important? This conversation is important for plants because we are talking about whether or not a plant is capable of making the decision, and if so, how do they do it? Again, without a brain mechanism, to make a choice, to listen to certain signals with greater, can't even use words because I want to say with greater attention, with greater focus or greater specificity. I don't know the right word. If you have a better word, please let me know. But all of this is something that the plant chooses to do. So attention is important. So this is why this paper actually is important and why it required all of these different cast of characters in order to have the conversation about it. I mean, we have biologists, plant physiologists, we have environmental ecologists, plant cognition experts, let's say it with this way, we have plant philosophers, we have a cast of characters here that are coming from different kinds of intelligence laboratories where they're looking at it from different factors. Priority, that's a great word. Thank you so much. As always, Michelle saves the day. Priority. Who do I give priority to? Priority means I can know all of my possibilities. I can take in my different possibilities and I can somehow in my mind, air quotes, mind, make a choice as to where I am going to focus. And that is what attention truly is. So, do you see why this whole conversation of attention is actually way more important than we might make it seem like? Attention means the plant makes choices on that priority. Okay. So let's read this article first, then we'll go through the paper and we'll see what we'll fill in the blanks, if anything. We'll probably just read the abstract at that point and the conclusion to see, because I have a feeling he goes in pretty in depth in this article. Okay. A paper has just come out. So this is just an indication. Again, this came out in January of this article is January of 2023. The article came out in 2022, probably at the end of 2022. So we're talking about this is still relatively recent stuff. A year and a half. This is awesome for us. Okay, a paper has just come out that I hope will create some buzz in the scientific community. I am buzzing. Are you? Are you buzzing? At least the part of it that deals with plant cognition. The article, published in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology. I like that it's called Progress in, is a collective effort with the contribution of researchers from the most diverse fields: biology, physics, philosophy, and psychology. That's what I was telling you about. To develop the hypothesis that plants are capable of paying attention. That's right, attention, literally. But let's take it easy to understand better. It has been known for a long time that plants are intelligent and cognitive. I think he just meant cognitive. That just looks like a typo. We understand. I'm so curious as to hold on, where some of these links go? What's my link? Hold on a second. Bear with me, because now I'm super curious as to where they're. Oh, okay. He's going to Chihuahua's book. Okay. I'm always so curious as to where they link things through. Okay. We know that they perceive and are aware of the environment around them, that they make decisions about what to do in different situations, that they can form memories and learn. Even complex forms of learning have been observed, such as associative learning. There's a lot of like typos in this. Well, he's Brazilian. I mean, we'll give him some slack. And that they communicate. Okay, I'm just looking at what are the papers that he links to. This is probably Galeano's paper, Learning by Association. Yeah, Galeano's paper, Learning by Association, that they communicate. Plant Sensing and Communication by Richard Carbon's Plant Sensing. This was another one of the researchers that was at the Plant Facts. He was fascinating, man, very unusual. I've read some of his work, but not a lot, but it was really quite interesting. So it's like putting all the little pieces together. That they communicate with each other and with organisms, and that they even act by anticipation. Let's see what article we're going in here. I have to kind of look in two screens because it only allows me to see certain things here. Anticipation across, who's this by? Oh, Ariel Novoplansky, who was also at Plant Facts. Wow. All of these same people were at the conference that I was in. Ariel Novoplansky was there, which was quite fascinating. Here we have Richard Carbon, who was also at Plant Facts, and Monica Galeano was not, but we've read this paper before. We've already gone through this paper before. And Anthony Chihuahua's, this is a book, actually, and we haven't gone through the whole book, but we've gone through some pieces of it. Okay, I'm going to read the whole paragraph again because I got caught up in all of the different links. But so let's take it easy to understand. We're talking about attention. It has been known for a long time that plants are intelligent and cognitive. We know that they perceive and are aware of their environment around them, that they make decisions about what to do in different situations, that they can form memories and learn. Even complex forms of learning have been observed, such as associative learning. And they communicate with each other and with other organisms, and even that they act in anticipation based on what they expect will happen in the future. A growing number of studies have revealed and consolidated the new understanding of plants as much more complex beings than previously thought. Look, only you, Mr. Scientists, only you didn't realize that they were complex beings, because we've known all along. Okay, we've known all along. Well, among Well, among all these studies on plant cognition, there is an important piece missing: the study of the phenomenon of attention in plants. Remember, we're talking about attention, priority, focus, where I choose something over something else. Attention is a particularly important and cognitive state because, as organisms have limited cognitive capacities, and since there are many stimuli received from the sense organs, it is necessary to prioritize what to perceive and what to respond to. In the same way, when we do something like driving or studying, we need to focus on what we're doing. We cannot be distracted by other stimuli that are unrelated to the task, under penalty of suffering an accident or not passing an exam, which, I don't know which is worse. Sometimes not passing an exam is worse. Attention, therefore, is essential for the very survival of the organism. Plants have an enormous amount of senses. According to some authors, even more than animals. They can perceive light in its smallest variations of intensity and spectral quality. They feel chemical substances in the air and in the ground. They perceive touch, gravity in a way they were able to hear, that is, perceiving and reacting to different sounds, which is hearing. They can perceive gradients of moisture in the soil, are sensitive to magnetic fields, and so on. In Reconnect with the Plant Kingdom, which is part of Blooming Sprouts in the Naturally Conscious community, I list all the different forms of tropisms, all the different known senses that plants have. I still think that there's a few that we don't know because there have been a number of studies that show different phenomena that plants are able to perceive without us understanding how it is that they perceive them. And as a consequence of this, which is, in my opinion, one of the most important factors for us as humans, is as part of my work on understanding consciousness and understanding perception in humans, I really believe that once we embrace our plantness, and this is what I work on as a life coach with many of my clients, is embracing your plantness allows us to tap into many of those senses ourselves. I do fundamentally believe that we as human beings have way more senses than the 5 that we've been told that we have. We have the ability to understand our world with much more clarity and much more, I'm thinking of the word, it's only coming to me in Italian, with much more finesse, it's much more refined, it's much more subtle, and that we have shut this off because as we disconnect from nature, we disconnect from our own true nature, our own authentic self. Therefore, we don't have the ability to access this. So a big part of my work, and the reason why I want to bring all of this work to you, and the reason I share all of this in a way that makes sense is, yeah, of course, for us to better understand the fascinating creatures that are plants. But also, I really do feel like the plants are trying to say, hey, hello. I don't want to tap on this because I don't know how loud it is, but tap, 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 tap. You're way more than you think you are, on a physical level as well as a non-physical level. So the papers that I study and I bring here to you are to help you better understand the physiological perspective of, hey, wait a minute, if we have last common ancestors in common, is it possible that physiologically speaking alone, we are way more than what we think we are, just because we also evolved from plants? And then in the naturally conscious community, we take that a step further, bringing in Kabbalah, bringing in, all of our spiritual physics, bringing in all these different other perspectives to help us understand, well, if we're that much more physically, is it possible that we're also that much more subtly or spiritually or etherically, whatever words feel right for you? And therefore, our true authentic nature is so much richer than we think it is. So this is the reason why, how all of this fits together. You are so much more than what you think you are. So much more. Okay. They can perceive gradients of moisture in the soil, are sensitive to magnetic fields, and so on. All of this at the same time and in 2 completely different environments: the dark, cool, compact subterranean world where the roots are, and the unstable, luminous, unpredictable aerial world where the stem and leaves are. This part, you know what it was only until very recently, like maybe last week recently, that it really clicked in my head the dual nature of plants and how amazing it is. Actually, it was probably when I was working on the scototropism episode of my podcast of Reconnect with Plant Wisdom, which is to really understand that plants are operating in this dual world at a level that we, again, probably can understand if we give ourselves, but in the current incarnation of the way we live our lives are so different because we tend to see night and day as, obviously these aspects that in come into our lives from the perspective of the season outside of ourselves. We don't realize that we have this darkness, this dark part inside of us. And I think of dark in a positive term. Please don't take any negative terminology from the word dark. I really love if you go and listen to, what is it, episode 77? Yes, scototropism is 77. Growing towards the dark. I really do believe that the darkness is this beautiful parts of ourselves that we really do not allow to flourish enough. But we also live this dual nature. And again, when we start to recognize our plantness, we can really step into what does it mean to grow in that darkness, all of everything that is happening underground and what happens above ground. And these kind of two states, these two physicalities, these two emotionalities, like all these different aspects. But anyways, that's an aside that we'll get into. Well, actually, head over to NCC. We're talking about this in the natural conscious community all the time. As you can see, plants receive and need to monitor an extraordinary amount of stimuli at the same time. Imagine yourself as a plant. I can do that. You cannot move. You can move. You're just moving differently. And at the same time, you feel that there are insects chewing on your leaves, the wind blowing, the water ending up in the soil, the intensity of the sun changing every minute, especially when a cloud passes by, worms rubbing against your roots, the sound of cicadas in your branches, other plants outgrowing you that could be a threat in the future. Why is he putting it all in the negative? Like, seriously, what about the beauty of the cooperation? The enticing, okay, there we go. That's positive. The enticing taste of a nutrient patch a few feet away, but where you need to direct the growth roots, fungi and bacteria communicating with your roots and trying to form a symbiosis. There we go, another positive. And chemicals in the air that carry messages from other plants. It's a lot going on at once, isn't it? And remember, you don't have a brain or even neurons to help process all this information. I know he's going to kind of explain it in a better way. So here it is. Look at that. Look at the little worm. Look at the little worm. Actually, here's another worm kind of going through. Everybody's eating it. There's a pathogen that's trying to attack me. Sorry, I'm getting carried away, but it's just fun. It's fun. Okay. In order to deal with all these stimuli, part of the problem is solved with the structure of plant bodies, which are modular. This means that they are made up of several repeating, semi-autonomous parts, each capable of dealing reasonably independently with the stimuli it perceives. The problems are then divided, and the cognition of the plants is distributed throughout their bodies. Divide and conquer. Each party is responsible for one thing. Yeah, we'll find out. So a root doesn't have to worry about the adjustments in photosynthesis that a leaf has to make every time a cloud passes in front of the sun. Nor does a leaf have to decide whether the root will grow towards a wetter, a more wetter? I don't know. Zone of soil or another one that appears to be rich in a particular nutrient. In addition, there could be a very important phenomenon, hitherto largely ignored in the literature, since the cognitive capacities of plants are limited. I want to understand how we think we know certain things. And I'm thinking about this in my own life because I've realized that reading all these papers and being very frustrated by certain terms has changed a lot. So if you come, so next week on October 17th, I'm doing a webinar, an interactive webinar called Befriend Your Limiting Beliefs so you can do things you once thought impossible. Seriously, if you suffer from limiting beliefs or you have a to-do list that's a mile long and for whatever reason you don't find yourself scratching things off, come to this webinar. Seriously, you're going to love it. I'll make sure I add it in the show notes. It's also on my website. It's, tigregardenia.com/befriend-your-limiting-beliefs. It's pretty simple. But anyways, I'll make sure it's in the show notes. The point I was trying to say about this is that, actually, wait a minute, hold your horses. I just realized I've never actually posted a comment myself. I've never done this before. So let's see if I can do it. Oh, look at that. Look at that. I'm going to get to your question, Michelle. Well, to your comment really, but bear with me for 1 second. For a second, give me a tangent that I'm going to go off on. My tangent is very quick, which is when you come to this webinar, you're going to hear me talk about this. I am by nature an extremely judgmental person. I have had to really work on understanding where my judgment and my negativity comes from. And part of my negativity has also been a language negativity that was by the way I was raised, by the way many of us speak in our language, whether it's for me English or Spanish or Italian now or any of the other languages that I speak. Which is this fact that when we don't know something or we just seem to assume, we just seem to put limitations on our assumptions. So in this particular case, what caught my attention, and the reason I'm bringing this up right now, is that it says, since the cognitive capacities of plants are limited, which I also hear said as, since plants don't have abstract thoughts, since plants don't have feelings, since plants how the hell do you know? I can understand you being able to say the things that plants can do because you've studied them. But how do you know that plants can't do that? What do you know about plant emotions and feelings? How could you even study that if we don't know, or if you don't know, most likely, how to communicate with plants? If you don't have a way to tap into plants to ask a question and get a yes or no answer, how do you know that plants do or don't do something? You might be able to physiologically understand what a plant can do, but why would you limit yourself to saying they cannot do something that you have no way of measuring? This is my pet peeve right now. Now, taking it back to what I was saying earlier as to why we study plants to better understand ourselves and to have a better relationship as part of the natural world, I realized that the reason this ticks me off so much is because I have done this for most of my life. And it wasn't until I was working with the plants that I could understand why it is that or better it is said, is how often I do this and why it's not helpful. How much I actually do this type of, I'm trying to get comfortable here. How it is that I assume certain things about others without really knowing. I assume that when they don't behave in a way that I understand, that means something. Especially if I can't ask them or if they're not cognizant themselves of what they do. And that has been one of the most eye-opening kind of understandings of deep self. And I will actually, in Befriend Your Limiting Beliefs. So come and listen to me in Befriend Your Limiting Beliefs, because I'm going to talk about where I think this comes from. What does it mean? Why do we do it? And how do we work through it? So the link is in the comments, because it's not helpful to us. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. I can make educated guesses on certain things, but I don't have to put hard limits. Like, there's one thing to say, we have not discovered that plants can blah, 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 blah. we do not think, or we don't know if plants know how to do this, or we don't understand if plants are doing this, how they do it. But I don't have to say they don't do it, because I have no way of knowing whether they do it or they don't do it. And I think that this is a really important lesson for us in general. I can say that I don't think a person is capable of something or doing something, but can I say that definitively if I haven't really connected with the person and asked the person directly? Probably not. Probably not. So I just say this because we need to stop putting so many absolutes in place. I just think that they're hurting us. So that being said, going back to Michelle's comment, which is, right, we're talking about the fact that plants don't have a one central brain system. They have this sort of compartmentalization. And Michelle knows about compartmentalization. So we have to think about this in a completely different way. If we keep trying to think of the centralized brain as our definition and our model, it's just not going to work. We're never going to understand plants if we keep thinking about it this way. So go back and I think it was 2 weeks ago when I did the paper on expanding the definition of your nervous system, because I think this is an excellent paper to help us better understand why this terminology doesn't help us. But anyways, let's get back into this paper itself. So we're talking about attention. It is necessary to prioritize the stimuli to which the plant responds. In other words, you need to focus on some stimuli that are most important at the moment and ignore others. Hence, give attention to. In other words, still, one has to choose what one pays attention to. But that means having a decision-making process. Do you see why this paper is so important? Are you starting to see it even more? Attention, then, can be understood as the phenomenon of prioritizing. Hey, Michelle, you had the right word, prioritizing, in a flexible and dynamic way, which stimuli we perceive and which we ignore over time, and to which we disproportionately invest energy. This is something that is constantly changing and involves an important balance between what is happening inside the body on a physiological level and outside the body. For example, if we're focused on a task, we may not notice that someone has left a bag of biscuits next to us. That's British biscuits, man. That's cookies. I want a bag of cookies because where I live in Italy, nobody makes good cookies. You can go and buy some like crappy ass cookies in a store, but it's usually kind of some fake American version. I want a nice, hot, delicious cookie. Michelle, can we borrow your husband? Because, he makes her cookies all the time, and we're always very jealous about this. However, if we are hungry, this otherwise irrelevant stimulus may reach our conscious awareness. There are many varieties of attention, and most of them have been identified and studied in humans, of course, because we don't think others have attention. Never, however, in plants. As far as I'm aware, the first person to address the topic of attention in plants was the philosopher from the University of Basque Country, Michael Marder. We love Michael Marder, just so you know. We don't love everything he says, but we love most of what he says. He's on our favorites list. Who in 2013 published an article which he proposed that plants would be capable of having attention. We studied that one. However, so go back through the old one. If you want to go back through our old papers, by the way, all of the links to all of the papers are on my website /commentary, tigriagardenia.com/commentary. You will find all of the old papers. Many of them are in the Naturally Conscious community. Some of them are on YouTube, but either way, you can find the links to all of them. Just go there. Okay. True. However, since that year, little has been discussed on the subject until 2021, when my colleagues and I published the article resulting from my master's thesis. In it, when studying the electrical signals of a parasitic plant when it perceives prey close to itself, we found what seems to us to be empirical evidence of an attention process in plants. I explained the findings of this research in this post here. Which post? Let's see what post this is. Let's see what post this is. This is his post. Parasitic plant recognizes its prey and possibly pays attention to it. He also posts it in 2023. All right, we'll read this. What do you think? Should we read it now? It's not very long. Let's read it now for a second because it's not very long. So we're taking a break from here because we want to understand this because this is previous. So let's get into this really quick. This is about how parasitic plant recognizes its prey and possibly pays attention to it. Yesterday, the 18th of March of this crazy 2021 was definitely crazy. I'm with you on that. 2021 was definitely crazy. Was a very special day. I had the article derived from my master's thesis published. In it, we demonstrate that the parasitic plant, the bizarre and almost alien daughter, Cuscuta racemosa, it is a very strange plant. It's a very strange plant. But that's what we like about Cuscuta. I mean, Cuscuta daughter is anyway. It's capable of differentiating host species and changing its behavior according to what it perceives. Furthermore, we notice, I love can you feel his excitement in this? Furthermore, we notice what may be the first empirical evidence of a process of attention in plants. You read it right, attention. Theoretically, the plant would be paying attention. Brief contextualization. The work was done during my master's thesis at the Federal University of Pelotas in Brazil in the graduate program in plant physiology and in the laboratory of plant cognition and electrophysiology. It was carried out with the guidance of Professor Dr. Gustavo Mais Souza and the participation of several colleagues, fundamental to the success of this research, it must be said. With the formalities done, let's get down to business, that is, daughter. This plant has no leaves or roots because daughter is a parasite and doesn't even carry out photosynthesis because daughter is a parasite, except for certain species such as Cuscuta racemosa, but still at a very low rate. He resembles a bunch of orange filaments that grow over the plant. When they do this, the daughter finds a way to penetrate the host plant with structures called hyphae, same as mycelium has, which connect to the vases of the host plants and absorb their sap in true plant vampirism. If you've been looking for vampires, here you go. So if you want to dress up like a vampire in next Halloween, which is coming up, dress up like daughter. Be Cuscuta. Be Cuscuta and be, the vampire that exists. Sorry, I couldn't resist that. When they do this, the daughters find a way to penetrate their host plants with structures called hyphae, which connect to the vases of the host plant and absorb their sap in a true plant vampirism. Many studies have shown that the daughter chooses the best plant to parasitize when it has more than one option. And this has led us to ask, if daughter chooses between hosts, it must somehow recognize the difference between one and the other. And this recognition must cause changes in the functioning, its physiology. So if we could observe what is happening inside the daughter when it perceives a host in the vicinity, would there be differences in this functioning depending on the perceived host? Our hypothesis was that yes. In particular, we had some hypotheses. First, the daughter senses the presence of hosts near it, or near key. Second, depending on the presence and species of the host, the daughter would produce different amounts of pigment related to its poor photosynthesis. And as we work with electrophysiology, we hypothesized that the bioelectric activity of the daughter would be different depending on the presence and species of the host present near it. To test this hypothesis, we carried out some experiments placing daughter twigs inside a box and close to two different types of host, a bean plant or a wheat plant, in the scheme like the one in the figure below. That just seems one plant. I thought there should be two. A bean plant or a wheat plant, that just looks like one plant. Okay. After leaving the daughter for a week in this condition, we measured the amount of pigments in the twigs. In addition, in another experiment similar to the one in the figure, we performed an analysis analogous to the electroencephalogram called the electrophytogram, in which we inserted electrodes in the daughter to monitor their bioelectric activity in the absence and presence of hosts in a box. The result was that, in fact, the daughter perceives when there are hosts nearby and changes Key's behavior depending on the type of host present. For example, when Key has no hosts near Key, the daughter produced more photosynthesis-related pigments, which we interpret as an attempt to prolong Key's survival through some photosynthetic activity. The same was confirmed by the bioelectric activity, which is different when there is a host nearby. Furthermore, the amount of pigments and bioelectric activity is different depending on the type of host present. That is, there is an electrical pattern associated with each type of host plant. The presence of the bean plant had one effect on the bioelectrical signals, and the presence of the wheat another. Let me read that sentence again. The presence of bean plant had one effect on the bioelectrical signal. So it had one kind of bioelectrical signal, and the presence of the wheat another. In conclusion, daughter recognizes hosts of different species from a distance. But the most surprising thing was another unexpected result of this work, due to a certain pattern of functioning of daughter's bioelectric signals. Namely, the signals became less random, more organized, regular, and predictable, in addition to being more strongly correlated. We believe we have found the first empirical evidence of a process or state of attention in a plant. Possibly, daughter was paying attention to its prey right there, close to Key, focusing on a strategy to attack Key and concentrating on it. Do you get what we're saying? We're saying that daughter's electrical activity changes depending on whether or not which kind of plant is nearby. And when daughter finds the right one, daughter focuses on that plant and starts paying attention in order to plan how Key is going to approach and penetrate this plant. All of a sudden, that sounded very dirty. Anyway, it is important to emphasize that our results are not yet an indisputable scientific fact. Although the article was published in a recognized and peer-reviewed scientific journal that it is reliable, it only opens up the possibility of studying processes such as attention in plants. To become a university accepted fact, there's still a lot of work to do. This is called covering your ass as a new scientist because you're young, you don't have a reputation, so you got to cover your butt. I hope this article starts off by causing a discussion in scientific circles, and also a discussion in the naturally conscious community we'd love to have. Some will disagree, some will agree, and I hope this will encourage other researchers to replicate these experiments or do similar experiments. Only then can we evaluate the body of evidence and try to reach a consensus. Who knows what will come out of it? However, it is clear that it is an interesting research, and I am happy that, in the midst of hardships and bitterness that science has been suffering in recent years in Brazil, we were able to publish it in an open access journal. That is, anyone anywhere in the world will be able to download the article for free. Although it is not easy to publish in such journals, it is quite expensive and resources are not always available. This time we did. This is wonderful because scientific knowledge belongs to humanity and should be accessible to all people. Without further ado, the work was carried out by the Federal University of Pelotas in Brazil and is signed by Gabriela Niemeyer Racing and all the others. I'm not going to read all their names. So this was the article that stirred him to his results. Okay. So now we come back to do plants pay attention? The analysis of electrical signals from plants using techniques. But by the way, this is as a very, very, very quick aside. Very, very quick aside. This is a great example of how one scientific discovery leads to another. One of the things that I loved, I'm almost positive that this researcher was the person that was with Souza when we were in Plant Facts, because it just, from the way that the person is writing, it feels like it's the same person. And so this is a great example of curiosity in science leading to a great discovery. And I really appreciate that. I appreciate that he was doing research with his team. They found something that they found was interesting. They followed that thread. We need more of that. We need more curiosity in science. Okay. The analysis of electrical signals from plants using techniques analogous to electroencephalogram of brains to empirically study the phenomenon of attention in them seems to be a promising idea, in addition to being an opportunity to combine theory and practice in real time to study an important aspect of plant biology. However, to study plant intention scientifically, a hypothesis is needed that justifies this idea. And new hypotheses are often born from the meeting of different minds and experiences. Sorry, my throat is hydration is very important today. Besides, my tea is now cold. Anyway, I like it cold. This is how, combining the philosophical contributions of Michael Martyr, the behavioral ecology knowledge of Monica Galliano, the experience in experimental psychology of Umberto Castiello. Oh, that's how the University of Padua got involved in all of this. Now I understand it. The understanding of physics and electrophysiology and physiological analysis of Tiago F.C. Oliveira, and the knowledge of plant physiology and electrophysiology of Gustavo Mais Souza, Gabriel R. de Toledo, and mine, all the latter from the Federal University of Pelotas in Brazil. I just like saying the word pelotas. Pelotas. I don't know. It's such a dumb word. In Spanish, it actually just means balls, balls, like a ball, to throw a ball. Pelotas. And I know it's a place, but it's a place in Brazil. But for me, it just says balls. And over many email and virtual conversations, given that we are still in times of a pandemic, the article, Do Plants Pay Attention? A Possible Phenomenological-Empirical Approach. In this article, we seek to develop a theoretical practical hypothesis to explain what it would be, how it would work, and how one could study plant attention, which I endeavor to explain below. So we have the paper open. We are going to look at it afterwards, but I think this is going to be a little easier to read and a little bit more clear. The possible, again, young scientist covering his ass, the possible attention of plants. Let's take two premises into account. First, attention is, very simply, the process of favoring certain stimuli and actions over others in order to be able to deal with the processing of these stimuli and the use of the information generated from there. That's definitely a better definition than the one I gave at the very beginning of this, where I was just stumbling over my own words. In Martyr's words, it is a disproportionate investment of physical or mental energy by an organism, tissue, or cell into a particular activity or into the reception of a singled out stimulus or set of stimuli. Much more technical. I like his definition better. This is an interesting definition because it is not cerebrocentric. Cerebrocentric. Bruh. It's not cerebrocentric. A brain is not necessary for attention to exist. Just an organism. You can tell that this is Martyr's definition. Just an organism, tissue, or cell that meets the aforementioned requirements, which opens up the possibility of not only plants, but any organism being attentive, such as fungi or even bacteria. And when we observe the behavior of plants, we understand that many of the activities they do would require attention. For example, studies with climbing plants show that they actively look for support to cling to, which requires identifying a goal and staying focused on that goal until you reach the desired support. I just realized that this paper is going to give me a whole new level for working with limiting beliefs. And because you know that I'm not a fan of discipline. You know I don't believe in discipline. I think that the idea that we need to focus on discipline is kind of dumb. And so the idea now of how to work on a plant's version of attention, this is going to be exciting. We're going to have some fun with this one. This is going to be exciting. It's going to be exciting. We're going to come up with a whole new way of getting shit done. Whole new way. This is exciting. Okay. And when we observe the behavior of plants, we understand that many of the activities they would do require attention. For example, studies with climbing plants show, this is what we were talking about, they cling to and they focus on the desired support. Any goal-directed behavior, such as growing towards a light source, supposedly requires attention because you got to know where the light source is. Think of an indoor plant that always grows towards the window. It maintains this growth, maintains this growth without being distracted by the alternatives between day and night or the lights that are turned on in the house, especially when it is dark outside. Roots might also pay attention as they grow towards the source of nutrients following the stimuli without being diverted, aka distracted, by others such as touch and sound. For example, another example is the carnivorous Venus flytrap, whose trap lobes contain 6 bristles that must be touched by an insect twice for key to close the trap, because it's not just one. This plant counts the bumber of times. Oh my goodness, what is this paper that says bumber of times? The Venus flytrap, Dionea, counts prey-induced action potentials to induce sodium intake. Okay. But what is, I love bumber. Anyway, sorry. I keep getting distracted today, but I'm just, hold on a second, because my network connection just went crappy-o for a second. And while I'm waiting for it to come back up, give me 1 sec. I'm actually going to open a little bit of light here because it's getting dark. This time of year, I'm going to come back to the paper in a second. This time of year is so frustrating to me because around this time is when the sun is starting to set. And so I am now on a summer schedule, which I know that I could do this entire thing with my window open and I don't have to have any kind of external light source. And then now the sun is setting, and depending on what time I finish, I might be completely in the dark. So I have to have like all kinds of different things ready. I don't have any lights on inside of my room. It's just a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. Like this whole light sourcey thing. So if it starts getting too dark and I look really funky, just let me know. Okay. Sorry. Where am I? This plant, which is Dionea, which is Venus flytrap, counts the bumber of times. I think it was supposed to be a number, and that was why. I'm just caught up by his typos. Number of times the bristles have been touched to know when to trigger closure. When a bristle is touched once, the plant needs to pay attention to the next stimulus, which requires keeping the memory of the previous touch in order to know whether or not to close the trap. It's a beautiful picture. Oh, look how nicely you can see the bristles. These examples allow us to assume that the plants are paying attention to what they do and feel. But how can we prove this empirically? How to know what is happening on a physiological level? This is where electrical plant signaling comes in. Like animals, plants are able to generate many electrical signals in their cells that travel through their bodies, carrying and bringing information. The set of all this electrical activity is called plant electrome. And we talked about this when we did Gustavo Souza's paper. So if you have questions about the whole plant electrome, go back to that paper. It was about 3 weeks ago. And the electrome can be studied using a technique analogous to the electrocephalogram called electrophytogram, from the Greek phyton, which means plant. I won't go into technical details because that's in the paper already, but by placing electrodes on plants, one can register how the electrical field between the electrodes varies over time, generating time series. Later on, time series are analyzed in many ways, from mathematical analysis to artificial intelligence classifications or machine learning. And by studying the complexity of these series and how the signals correlate, we can get some idea of what's going on inside the plant. Despite the technical convenience, a potential difficulty in studying attention in plants is precisely their already mentioned modularity. If every part of a plant, leaves, branches, and roots, is semi-autonomous, how is an entire plant going to pay attention? And the better question is, does the entire plant need to pay attention? What do we mean when we say a plant is paying attention? Well, precisely because of this, the phenomenon of attention in plants might be considerably rare. Is it rare or just modular? However, there are times when the entire plant needs to coordinate its behavior. For example, when the roots detect that there is no more water in the soil, they send electrical signals to the leaves so that they close the stomata, small adjustable pores that allow the exchange of gases and release of vapor or mist or precipitation in order to avoid water loss. Afterwards, they begin to synthesize a hormone called ABA, not to be confused with the Swedish papen, which I think he means ABBA, which is actually two B's, so nobody would confuse it. But he's Brazilian. Give him a little slack. Which encourages the leaves to keep their stomata closed. The leaves themselves begin to produce ABA on their own, and the whole plant then begins to accumulate sugars and produce proteins that increase resistance to drought. All of this requires collective, coordinated effort in all parts of the plant to solve a common problem, aka not having enough water. If we use Anthony Trova's analogy that plants function as a democratic confederation, oh my goodness, I am just so where did Trovava say a democratic confederation? Oh, I never went through this with you. I mean, I've read this paper before, but I've never read this one with you. This was in Annals of Botany way back in 2003, and we started in about 2006. So I missed this one from the perspective of sharing this one with you. But this is another good one. This is very, very early on, though. Very early. I'll link it in the show notes, so I'll keep it all open. Let's imagine that a plant in a normal state is a country within normal times where each inhabitant lives their own life, communicating with others when necessary. These citizens know that they are part of the same country. They have documents that prove it. They share a common culture and language. But this is somewhat dispersed, weak belonging. That's the way most countries are. Now let's imagine that the World Cup has arrived. Oh, you can tell he's Brazilian, right? Like for me, the World Cup didn't mean anything. Like the Super Bowl. Let's go with that. No, it's the same thing. In this case, everyone changes their behavior and the feelings of belonging to how about just the Olympics? Everybody can agree with that. Now let's like that the Olympics have arrived. In this case, everyone changes their behavior and feelings of belonging to the country. It is exasperated. Fair weather fans. When the national team is playing, everyone gathers in front of the televisions and with perfect synchrony from north to south, they suffer every penalty and celebrate every goal. The whole country stops to pay attention to the game. This is more or less how plant attention works. And since electrical activity is apparently involved in all plant behavior, it is to be assumed that a plant paying attention would have the complexity of its signals reduced, becoming more regular, synchronized, and predictable, just like the activity of the inhabitants of a country becoming more predictable during the Olympics. It's easy to assume that almost everyone will be in front of a television at the same time, that everyone will shout when the ball hits the opposing team's net, and everyone will jump, cheer, and cry together when the referee whistles the end of the match, announcing the victory of the team. My Olympics analogy, I couldn't keep it going. In the article, we reviewed the literature looking for evidence that plant activity would work like this when they are in situations that supposedly require attention. When the available information indicates is that, that was me reading it wrong, is that apparently this hypothesis makes sense. In almost all the cases analyzed, the electrical signaling of different species studied behaved as expected, which paves the way for empirical research on plant attention. Therefore, we should have a theoretical and practical starting point to investigate this possible phenomenon, which can fill an important gap in the study of plant cognition and intelligence, attention and consciousness. The article also adds fuel to an already quite hot discussion, which is the debate on whether plants could be conscious. They're stepping into some really hot water right now, but more power to them. The debate has gained momentum in recent years, with some authors clearly demarcating their positions for or against. Ooh, what did he link to for and against? Let's see who's for. This is for integrated information as possible basis for plant consciousness. Oh, this is one of Calvo's articles. What year is this from? Hold on. I'm so curious. It doesn't have a year. I hate when they don't put the year. Oh, here it is, 2021. I actually don't know if I've gone through this paper. I don't know if I have access to it. It's probably behind a firewall, and that's the reason why I haven't been able to do this. All right, let's see which one he went for the against part, because we've read so many articles on this. Oh, this one we did go over. We went over this together. Oh, this is a John Mallet. Yep. This is Debunking a Myth, Plant Consciousness. This is a 2021 article. No, sorry, 2020 article that also we went through. And this is actually open. So this is free access because we went through this. Interesting. And it is logical that is still far from reaching any conclusion. However, it is interesting to note that within the phenomenological tradition of philosophy, what did he link to? Books. I'm not going to go to books. Attention and consciousness are so related that they could be considered synonymous. Ooh. Attention is consciousness, folks. No wonder there was an argument. So during Plants Facts, the conference that I went to a few weeks back, there was a discussion, an argument, not a discussion, it was an argument between Souza and, oh, I can't remember his name. He's a researcher out of the University of Turin in Italy who studies the relationship between fungi and plants, who was very angry with Souza, who was trying to say that our mechanistic approach of studying the way plants interact is no longer, what's the right word? Hold on, let me think my words carefully. May not, even me myself be a little bit, may not always be the best approach because it misses out on some aspects that we need, that like, it's almost like we can't see the true extent of plants if we look at them from this mechanistic approach and dividing up. In other words, sorry, hold on. I'm trying to, I don't know. The sum of the parts, which is like, in other words, we can't dissect, just look at the parts. It doesn't give us the same thing as if we look at the whole story. So very, very interesting, which is that now I understand better why they were arguing. Because, there are a lot of scientists that do not want to look at this as plants are conscious. They just don't want to go there. This makes sense if we think that we are only aware of what we pay attention to. If at a party we are so absorbed in conversation with a beautiful person that we are interested in, we are not aware of the horrible music that may be playing. Our attention and awareness is focused on the person who attracts us. When we sleep, we are not paying attention to anything. In fact, we are unconscious. So if there is such a thing as plant consciousness, studying its attention, both empirically and philosophically, can help shed light on this debate. The interesting thing is that plants being modular, I think he used Google Translate for this, by the way, they would rarely be in a full state of attention. The most likely is that each module, each part of the plant, is dealing with local stimuli and actions, which makes sense, which are not perceived by the entire plant. This makes the plant as a whole closer to what we'd call a state of distraction, with its awareness supposedly scattered and unfocused. That doesn't make sense. Of course, the plant is not scattered and unfocused. The plant is multifocused. I don't understand sometimes how we come to certain definitions. Why would you say that the plant is scattered and unfocused? You're using a centralized view that is a humanistic view. But if we look at this from the plant being able to take in multiple stimuli at once and being focused on multiple things at once is actually much more conducive to the way the plant lives. And wouldn't it be awesome if we could do that? Isn't that what we're learning to do? We do so many activities here in Damanhur. We do metratura to help expand our perception in order for us to be able to hold more things in attention. So, on the contrary, for us, we are trying as human beings to learn how to do this. So, this isn't scattered and unfocused. This is multi-focused, which is super powerful. Weird. However, when the plant as a whole needs to coordinate to achieve a goal or solve a problem, all the relevant modules synchronize and the plant focuses. No, the I do not like this. I do not like this conclusion on its activity or problem. Presumably becoming aware of what attracted its attention, and who knows, maybe becoming aware of itself as an organism. Do you understand why my work is so hard sometimes? Why would you assume that the plant is not aware of that the plant, that key is one organism? Of course, plant knows it. Of course, key knows that key is one organism. This is a great one. This further explains why plants are marginalized a lot like women are marginalized, in which many of the same problems. Of course, we can't multitask. Multitasking doesn't exist except when you're multitasking. And why would a plant not be able to Of course, a plant can multitask and give attention to multiple things. Not everything, still selective, but multitask. And who knows, maybe becoming aware of itself as an organism, more or less like people who suddenly feel that they are part of the same nation during the World Cup. Look, it's not like they don't know that they're part of the same nation when the World Cup isn't on. They know that they're part of the same nation. They just don't care about it in that particular case. Plants know that plants are plants. Plant knows that I am the organism and that you are a different organism over here and you're a different organism over there. I just don't need to make a national act out of it. Ugh. So frustrating. You were doing so well. Then these are, of course, uncommitted digressions. Nevertheless, perhaps the formulation of the theory of plant consciousness involves studying attention in plants, which is important to emphasize is just a hypothesis, because I'm a young scientist and I don't want you to kill me. The idea of the article published in Progress in Biophysics and Molecular Biology is to demonstrate that the phenomenon of attention in plants is possible and that it can be tested empirically, is to pave the way for this line of research. Going forward, one should test the hypothesis with robust experiments and discuss them with due philosophical depth and appropriate levels of skepticism. This is at the end of my article where I'm being a little strong. Then I'm going to step back a little just to make sure that I cover my scientific ass and make sure that I continue to be able to have research money. In the future, we hope to have enough data to support the hypothesis that plants pay attention and, who knows, might be conscious. This work is just beginning. I was right. Google Translate. This post was originally published in Portuguese on the 4th of July, 2022. Okay. It's a good article overall anyway. It makes it easier to understand what it is, this paper. So this particular, sorry, it's like my cursor. So this is actually a really good base for what is the overall, hold on, let me find the paper itself, because we're not going to now go over the entire paper. I just want to go over a few little pieces of it and see what we can get out of it. There it is. Okay. So this is the paper that he's referencing. Do plants pay attention? A possible phenomenological-empirical approach. And again, he mentions this multiple, this transdisciplinary work, which is true. And I'm very happy about that. So I want to read the abstract. And then we're probably going to just go down to the conclusion because I don't think we need to go through the whole thing. But we'll just skim through it to see. Attention is the important ability of flexing controlling limited cognitive resources. It ensures that organisms engage with the activities and stimuli that are relevant to their survival. Despite the cognitive capabilities of plants and their complex behavioral repertoire, the study of attention in plants has been largely neglected. In this article, we advance the hypothesis that plants are endowed with the ability of attaining attention states. We depart from a transdisciplinary basis of philosophy, psychology, physics, and plant electrophysiology to propose a framework that seeks to explain how plant attention might operate and how it could be studied empirically. In particular, the phenomenological approach seems particularly important to explain plant attention theoretically, and plant electrophysiology seems particularly suited to study it empirically. We propose the use of electrophysiological techniques as a viable way for studying it, and we revisit previous work to support our hypothesis. We conclude this essay with not paper, essay, with some remarks on future directions for the study of plant attention and its implication on botany. Okay, let's see what's different between this and the article. I'm curious. Let's see. Broadly speaking, cognition can be defined as the process by which organisms perceive, process, value, store, and use environmental cues to increase their chances of survival. Once it was believed that the only organisms endowed with a central nervous system and brains could be considered cognitive agents. Yeah, well, we don't believe that at all. However, cognition seems to be far from widespread phenomenon. Indeed, many authors currently understand cognition as the sine qua non phenomenon supporting life. This means that all organisms are, in essence, cognitive. Oh, I have to read more about Varela. I really feel like I am missing. I'm going to write myself a note. Hold on a second. I need to read more about Varela's work. I really enjoyed the little that I have read about autopoiesis and such, but I don't know enough. Indeed, amazing cognitive capabilities have been recognized even in non-neural organisms such as bacteria, slime molds, amoeba, fungi, and plants. In this connection, many questions regarding the nature of non-neural cognition have been raised. For example, what constitutes cognition in non-neural organisms? 2, when and how is this behaviorally expressed in these systems? And 3, whether investigating cognition in non-neural systems raises important evolutionary questions, such as, are there limits to where and when cognition can evolve? To address these questions, we need both a solid philosophical and epistemological basis as well as empirical data. To stay on the subject of plants and the focus of this work, it has been demonstrated that they are aware of their environment. Novoplansky's work is another one. Hold on, I'm writing because Novoplansky, I was able to read some of his work. Ariel is his name. Some of his work at the conference, but I haven't read a lot. Cahill, on the other hand, I adore. Although I asked Cahill a question directly and his answer was not exactly what I expected, because I was asking about consciousness and cognition in plants, and he was like, I actually don't care. I just want to do the research, which was his way of saying, I am not on team cognition, team not cognition. I'm on team, let's do the experiments and let's see what happens. Which was fair. I just would have thought that by now Cahill would have, with everything that Cahill has done, I would have thought that he would have understood. But anyway, that's fine. I think that's another one of like, let me cover my ass type of thing. And they project future situations and act upon expectations in goal-oriented manners. That they are able to make decisions. Ooh, there's a lot more papers about decision making. That they communicate with each other and with other organisms. Oh, and carbon. Hold on. Carbon. I need to read more about carbon. Oh, so many papers. And that they are able to store memories and learn. There is even evidence of higher forms of learning in plants, such as learning by anticipation and association. That is true. We've read many of those papers. This is only the beginning, and many new scientific questions are yet to be addressed. One of these questions deals with the possibility that plants can be attentive towards certain environmental cues. In other words, could a plant focus on specific environmental cues relevant to the accomplishment of a cognitive task, to the exclusion of other cues, hence attention? With this question in mind, we reviewed available literature and evaluated whether there is evidence supporting the hypothesis that plants are capable of attaining attentive states. We propose that this claim can be supported by studies on plant electrophysiology, at least at the level of plant organs. Electrophysiology is particularly important in this process because electrical signaling is one of the main routes for rapid information integration in the plant body when plants face environmental changes. Attention here is intended as a cognitive process that allows organisms to handle a selected piece of all the relevant information in the environment at the time. The main idea is that by focusing on the most important environmental cues at the moment, hence giving priority, thank you, Michelle, the amount of information to be dealt with is reduced so that the behavior outcome is optimized. In this view, attention allows a more efficient investment of energy. In this work, based on the fields as diverse as psychology, philosophy, physics, and plant electrophysiology, we developed this hypothesis and propose an empirical approach to study the phenomenon of attention in plants. At the outset, we shall briefly outline the varieties of attention and how they are currently operationalized, focusing on how they could be applied to plants. Naturally, we cannot equate human attention to how plants function in their worlds. Thank you. No, we can't. But we ask the reader to indulge us in using a terminology usually reserved for human experience throughout the review. I will indulge you if you promise to state that this is your human-centric view with the intention of discovering alternative views. Then I can excuse that for a second. In section 3, we approach the concept of attention within the phenomenological tradition and explore how it might be important to plant biology. Then, in sections 4 and 5, we shall discuss how studies of the electron plants could be useful to study attention in plants. We've already discussed that because we just went through that in Sousa's paper. We conclude our essay by discussing the potential implications of our hypothesis for botany and life sciences in general. Okay. Since we have read this article, we are not going to go through everything because the article gives us a synthesis of it. So we've already discussed what is attention, even though, as it says here, it is certainly far from a clear or unified concept, as are most concepts. Okay. Then the variety of attentions. This might be interesting. The scientific study of attention began in psychology, where careful behavioral experimentation gave rise to precise demonstrations of the tendencies and abilities of attention in different circumstances. Below, the broad classes of attention, which could be operationalized in plants, will be introduced. Arousal, alertness, or vigilance. Sorry, my mind went in the gutter for a second. In its most generic form, attention could be described as merely an overall level of alertness or ability to engage with surroundings. In this way, it partly overlaps with the arousal and the sleep-wake spectrum. In psychology, vigilance refers to the ability to sustain attention and is therefore related to it as well. So, one is alertness. And one is sustained vigilance. Vigilance is sustained, and the other one, okay, I get it. All right, I don't think we're going to go into how all of the different ways that it's and selective attention and the control of action. I want to go to the plant-specific parts. Because again, we've read so many of these different pieces and because of the time. So these are all the different forms of attention. Attention and memory, attention, all of the attention. So this is great. I'm going to publish the article, the article itself, so you can find it and you can read it. The plant electrum, I'm not going to go into. Well, actually, hold on. Let me see how long it is. Because we go through the plant electrum in detail in Sousa's paper. So that's why I'm not going to go through this right now, because this is really getting technical and it's not important. I want to get to the conclusion. See, because we're not reading formulas, okay? We're definitely not reading formulas. Entropy, all of the formulas, because remember, these are all electrophysiologists, so they all have to understand that. Okay. A possible framework for plant attention. In recent work, sorry, I keep messing with this. In recent work, Parise and al. Studied the parasitic daughter plant. So this is what we were talking about relating to daughter. So this is the entire explanation of how they did the work with daughter. We're getting through it. There's so much here. Yeah, we're definitely not getting into scientific formulas or graphs because we've read everything. Okay, are we paying attention to plant attention? According to the data available, the existing evidence supports the hypothesis that plants are capable of attaining attentive states. It seems that when a task requires coordinated behavior, this is everything that he just said in his conclusion. Why are you talking about Galeano here? Oh, no. We talked about all of this. Oh, that's his conclusion. Okay, let's just read this conclusion anyway. We just talked about it, but I want to read the conclusion because I feel like it's important for us to read the conclusion. It seems that when a task requires the coordinated behavior of the entire plant, signals apparently become more regular. Sorry, I just read Michelle's comment about we're not taking a side. His work may be viewed as more valid. Like, I don't know. We shall find out. Nobody's taking sides here. Nobody's taking sides. We're all reviewing to see what's possible. This is very much different from the way Galeano writes, that it's like, it is this way. And he's like, we just found all this evidence and maybe it's this way. I love it. I love the differences. The signal apparently become more regular and coordinated. Okay, it is conceivable also that there is more energy being expended with these signals because of the increase in the mean delta V in most cases. That's the difference in V. This is encouraging factor as far as the viability of our hypothesis is concerned, but some caveats must be mentioned before we proceed to the discussion. Despite the potentially general applicability of our hypothesis, for most land plants have the same modular structure, there is no reason to think that attention behavior will work equally in all species. Fair enough. That is totally fair. We do propose that the electrum of plants under a state of attention will likely behave as we described, but it will probably vary depending on plant species, the individuality of each plant, its age, and the kind of stimulus it is receiving. In addition, the studies mentioned above considered the mean of all the time series with their different lengths, which eliminates the influence of time in the process. The process of attention is likely to last for different time lengths depending on plant species and the individuality of each plant. It might last only until the problem or the task the whole plant faces is solved. This was not the case in most of the studies presented in Table 1 and Figure 1 because stimuli lasted for the entire time series recordings. And this is why we believe the values presented there are reliable. However, in the future, it will be desirable to monitor the value variations of the proposed parameters through time in order to understand its dynamics. In the study of Simi et al., for example, plants were infected by the biotrophic fungus Odium and that thing, which deceives the plant's immune system by making itself undetectable to the plant. According to alterations in the tomato plant's electrome were only detectable on the first day of the infection, when the fungus was penetrating the plant cells, and 4 days before the first visible symptoms of disease. This could justify the increase in the overall complexity of signals, as presumably some modules were working differently, so that richer information was running throughout the plant. If the process of whole plant attention had occurred, it was likely to have happened only in the first 24 hours post-infections or less. Without observing these developments through time, information on this transient attentive state is lost. The studies by Galeano et al. On plant learning also suggest that a transient process of attention might have occurred, but in opposite directions. Learning by habituation, as a phrasing, means that a harmless stimulus causes a reaction by the organism, but as the organism is repeatedly stimulated, it learns to ignore it. This suggests that a harmless stimuli initially triggers an attentive state towards it, but through the habituation process, the organism gradually pays less attention to the stimulus until not perceiving it anymore. I don't know if I agree with that. I think that's a huge leap. I don't know if their testing shows that because we didn't read that, but I would think that there is another explanation, which is not that the organism pays less attention to the stimulus, but well, I mean, it depends on what you define in this case as attention. I think they register that it happens and then they just ignore it because it's not important. It's kind of like, wow, here we're really going into human terms now that I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about it for a second. Because if you think of some of the things like our sensitization, we're desensitized to certain experiences so that when we see them, we don't even pay attention to them. So I think that that's why they're using that. Certain dangers we no longer even register rather than registering them and ignoring them. Or maybe we do that in our unconscious state and therefore we don't I'm going to get myself down a rabbit hole. I'm going to get myself totally down a rabbit hole. Okay. This suggests that a harmless stimulus initially triggers an attentive state toward it, but through the habituation process, the organism gradually pays less attention to the stimulus until not perceiving it anymore. Is it not perceiving it, or is it just ignoring it when it perceives it? Because it doesn't think it's harmful. I don't know. This is likely what happened with the Mimosas pertica plants when they fall. When the fall, they were repeatedly subjected to did not trigger the closing of the leaves. In contrast, sensitization, the opposite of habituation, could require more and more attention as the organism becomes more sensitive to the stimulus. Similarly to sensitizations, associative learning presumably causes the opposite effect of habituation on attention. A cue that was originally neutral, i.e., not worthy of attention, increasingly becomes more significant to the point where the plant cannot help but respond to that cue. It learns to pay attention to it as a prerequisite to associative learning. These studies illustrate the importance of time in the process of attention, which should not be neglected in future studies. Overall, the phenomenon of attention in plants seems to be transient and context dependent, much as it is in other living organisms. Modules or groups of modules are attentive to the relevant cues and signals they perceive, and the whole plant attention may only emerge rarely, occasionally, and depending on the plant's needs. There is always a basal communication communication between the modules, and they all know that they belong to a higher unity. This is what enables plants to recognize self, to distinguish self from non-self, and to understand their physical boundaries. Ooh, some would already even argue that part. Physiological integration is extremely important for the modules to recognize themselves as part of the plant. But this recognition mechanism can be reinforced when whole plant attention is required, presumably provoking the bioelectrical effects described above. We could therefore say that a plant oscillates between distraction and awareness, between not being and coming into being. This transient and distributed nature of plant attention can provide insights into new hypotheses about how this phenomenon occurs and its implications for plant growth, adaptability, and ecological relationships. We discussed attention broadly as the phenomenon of selecting a piece of all the relevant information in the environment to direct attention. However, as mentioned in section 2, there are many varieties of attention, though most of these studies were performed in human subjects. To understand which of the varieties of attention present in plants is a goal for the future. We already suggested some of the situations in which different kinds of attention could be necessary to plants, which can provide ideas for new hypotheses and experiments to test on. Finally, due to the close relation between attention and awareness, consciousness, God, they're bold in really getting into this in the very beginning, getting into the consciousness argument, because it's an argument. I mean, there's definitely a team of people here that are getting into this argument. No wonder neurologists get so pissed off. I love it. I love it. You go. I am definitely cheering this on. Especially in the phenomenological tradition, we indulge ourselves to go a little further in the possible outcome of empirical studies on plant attention. Lately, some authors have been discussing the possibility of consciousness in plants, a highly controversial topic. So fucking controversial. We've gone through all of those papers. They are just like, let's fight. In human brains, empirical evidence for consciousness has been considered in terms of changes in electrical activity that are triggered by some stimuli. A subject is only conscious or aware of a stimulus if it is strong enough to recruit the attention of a great part of the cortex. Although we avoid any kind of anthropomorphism, an analogous functioning of putative plant consciousness, i.e., recruitment of bioelectrical activity to deal with some stimulus or set of stimuli, is not impossible. That's a good way of skirting around it. That's like, let me piss you off, but not piss you off so much, or let me piss you off, but not give you that much ammunition when you come after me. Because that's what's going to happen by all these neurobiologists. Parise and Mallet and some of these others, they're just going to come after. Lincoln Ties especially is going to be like, you can't talk about consciousness in plants because there is no brain. He cannot get over this idea that there is a form of consciousness that does not involve brain function. It's a Although we avoid any kind of anthropomorphism, I'm going to say it again, an analogous functioning of putative plant consciousness, i.e., recruitment of bioelectrical activity to deal with some stimulus or set of stimuli, is not impossible. When all the modules coordinate their behavior to attend to a cue, could we say that the plant as a whole became conscious of that cue or conscious of itself as a whole organism? You have already stated that the plant is aware of self. You set it higher up. We are arguing and we're going in like, we're dancing around topics. We know plants are conscious of themselves. Does that equate to consciousness? But who can define consciousness? Nobody can. That's the big problem. This is an intriguing question to be investigated in the future. In conclusion, we have proposed a phenomenological-empirical approach to address plant attention, a very neglected aspect in current studies of plant cognition. I like this approach because, well, I'll get there in a minute. If our hypothesis is correct, it opens vast possibilities to study attention not only in plants, but also in other modular organisms like fungi and sea sponges. However, there is much work to be done. The hypothesis needs to be corroborated with careful experiments specifically designed to test it. And herein, we provide some of the tools to do it. To all the experimental scientists reading this, we hope it sounds like an invitation. Get away from there. This is kind of exciting. Here's the exciting part of this. And hopefully you can understand why I'm excited about this. This is exciting because up until now, the entire conversation around consciousness has surrounded itself around generic cognitive function and plant decision-making, learning, memory, and all these different aspects, of which we do not have the biological mechanisms that unfortunately neurobiologists are looking for. Now, Balushka has gone after the idea of the root tip having auxins that are kind of neuron-like emitters. There are also other conversations around plants having neurotransmitters, like very similar and if not the same chemical structures at times that are neurotransmitters in humans. There has also been, of course, the behavioral aspects. This goes after the idea of a bioelectrical signals, which is on attention, where it is fairly understood in the scientific community of human neurobiology that this equates to, hold on, I just realized that I'm like showing you like the last page of this rather than the first page of this, where we are looking at this from the perspective that if attention equals consciousness in general, in other words, if the general scientific community of human neurobiologists equate attention, which is demonstrated through these electrical signals, as consciousness, and this plays out to be correct, that plants have these same signals that seems like they are attentive, then then you have to go down the path of plants being conscious. Mm. I'm excited to see what papers have come after this. This is Oh, and then Michelle, of course, has to touch other aspects. So how does that work with cuttings that become a plant? Does it recognize the mother plant as itself? This is going back to oneself. So this is the experiment that I have been doing with, I don't even know if you can see because you can't because I have this. Hello? Oh no, because everything moved. Did I move? Oh, I moved. Oh, because you can't see it because I have, hold on. Sorry. I just realized why you can't. I'm like, why can't you see? There. This plant right here, which is cutting to a certain extent from another plant that's up there. And it's a great question, Michelle. I can only give you my answer that comes from my work with plants, but this is going to be an interesting piece as to at what point does the plant become independent of where can key came from. So if a key came from another plant, at what point is it when roots appear and I become physically separated that I experience myself as an individual plant? This is a great question. It's a great question. I don't have good answers to it. I mean, it's one of those things we're working on. So this is one of those, that's exactly the type of conversation I want to have in the naturally conscious community, because I think it helps us better understand like our plant friends and understanding the differences and what happens with cuttings and when is a cutting a good idea and when is a cutting not a good idea. I have to say that I watch a lot of, like Instagram reels that talk about propagation of plants, and it's cringeworthy, some of it, because again, it's done with no regard for the plant, no relationship. Like, let me just propagate so I can have more pretty things at home. And it's so frustrating. And yet there's others that, like, I have a friend of mine that every time, a plant sort of gifts a piece, a leaf that falls or something, then she propagates from there. And she really regards it as a gift that the plant gives her. So she always has these pretty little jars of water that are available in case any plant decides to give her a gift that wants to be propagated. And I think that that's a really beautiful way of looking at it. So I do think that there are ways for us to approach this. And I think these are the kinds of discussions I want to have in the naturally conscious community so that we can get into a better relationship with what is the desire of plants in conjunction with our desire as humans. In other words, to co-create together. So I really am enjoying like today's, both of these papers. I think that they're really exciting to go through this. So by the way, for everybody, ancestor is one of the plants that Michelle has been working with for a long time. So ancestor says it's a you problem. It's a you problem. It's us that we don't understand. And I agree with this. This is a you problem. This is a human problem. This is a problem where we as humans still do not understand because we are so far away from our understanding of what it means to be an individual in as part of a whole, and where that individuality is important to recognize and where that individuality is not important to recognize. So I do agree with you, Michelle. I do think it is a human problem. It's an us problem. And I think that we have an opportunity to kind of reach a new level with this. And I think we're getting closer. I think papers like this are definitely getting closer. The idea of looking at this from an attention perspective is super exciting. It changes. It implies that the plant is aware and knows what's happening, but not only that, is like prioritizing and giving space to something. And that's a very different way of thinking about it. So I hope you enjoyed this edition of our Plant Consciousness Commentary. I hope you will join us in the Naturally Conscious community to continue on these conversations. I will be publishing not just here on YouTube, but also in on my website with more show notes, with more information and more data for you, as well as in the Naturally Conscious community. I'll be publishing also this video and more details so that we can continue on in the conversation. And it's exciting. There's lots of stuff going on. You can also find me on Instagram and on Facebook and also on LinkedIn, so that if you want to kind of get a better idea of what it is that I do, what I talk about, how you can connect in, and how you could also benefit from this work, these are the various places to find me. You find me on my website, you find me on Instagram, you find me on Facebook, and I'm here. I'm here. I'm always here. I'm always somewhere. I'm always somewhere. I'm easy to find. I'm very easy to find. So that being said, that is it. We did it. We did it in under 2 hours. It's always amazing at how long it takes to go through these papers. I have been looking through, by the way, the upcoming papers, and you are not going to want to miss the next few weeks. Now, next week, we have the first discussion of the new book that we're reading in the Plant Wisdom Book Club, which is called Ways of Being. And so that book, and you can find the Plant Wisdom Book Club on my website. Also, that is going to be at 5:00. So we will start an hour later than we normally start, but don't worry, the event will be there on YouTube, and so that you can find it, and also in the Naturally Conscious community, so you can find it. But we're going to, we're going to go through our book. I'm really excited about it. I got some deep reading to go through this weekend because I'm a little bit behind in my reading, but it's not a problem. I will catch up, and the book seems really interesting, so I'm excited to do it. That being said, that is it for me. If you have any questions, again, reach out to me. If you've enjoyed what you've experienced, as always, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, hit like, leave me a comment, share this with your friends, all those things that really go to support us. And if you want to support more plant consciousness commentary, then join the Naturally Conscious community, because that's the place where we have these conversations, and, join a membership even. There's lots of stuff to see. So you head over to my website, to tigriagardenia.com/NCC. Super easy to find. Okay. That being said, that's it. I'm done. I'm closing it off. Remember, resist the urge to hold back your emerging green brilliance. And that's it. That's it for me, Tigriagardenia. We will see each other next week. I'm out. Bye.